It was the last week of August in 1991. One of those South Georgia nights when the heat never really lets go. When the air stays thick as syrup long after dark, and the cicadas keep up their electric hum in the pines until you stop hearing them at all. In the little town of Ashford, population 4,000, the Dixie Cream drive-in sat glowing at the edge of Route 9, a box of light in the dark countryside, and behind the counter a 19-year-old girl named Callie Pruitt was wiping down the soft-serve machine and counting the register the way she did every summer night. She was home from her first year of college, saving for a car and a nursing degree, singing in the church choir on Sundays, and teaching the little ones their Bible verses, and she had a laugh you could pick out from clear across a room. At 10:15 she flipped the sign, killed the lights, and walked out to the gravel lot toward her daddy's old pickup, the gold cross at her throat, catching the last of the neon before it went dark. It was a drive she had made 100 times, 4 miles of red clay road between the Dixie Cream and her family's front porch. She never made it home, and the truth of what happened to Callie Pruitt on that road would stay buried for 33 years, while an innocent man sat in a prison cell for a crime he did not commit, until a science that couldn't be lied to finally set the record straight. But to understand how a whole town got it so wrong, you first have to understand Ashford and the girl the whole town thought it loved. Ashford in 1991 was peach country and pecan country, red clay and longleaf pine, a town where the Baptist church set the rhythm of the week and everybody's business traveled the party line faster than the phone company ever could. There were no cell phones. If you wanted somebody, you drove to where they were. The Dixie Cream on Route 9 was where the teenagers gathered on summer nights, and the drive-in movie 2 miles down still ran on Fridays. And on Sunday mornings half the county filed into the pews to hear Harold Pruitt lead the music. Harold was the church's song leader, a gentle man with a booming voice. And Callie was his only daughter, the light of that family, with a little brother named Danny who worshipped her. Callie Pruitt was the kind of girl grown women in town described by saying she'd make some family a wonderful mother someday. She kept a diary with a little brass lock. She wore that thin gold cross her grandmother had given her at baptism and never took it off. She had spent the summer scooping ice cream and dreaming out loud about nursing school, about the good she was going to do, and she treated the old folks who came through the Dixie Cream line like they were the most important customers in the world. On Sunday, August 25th, she sang a solo in the morning service, an old hymn about crossing over the river, and more than one person in that congregation would later say they could not sit through that hymn again for years. 2 nights after she sang it, she locked up the drive-in for the last time. The night moved in a sequence the town would take apart 1,000 times. At 10:15, a passing trucker saw the Dixie Cream go dark and a young woman crossing the lot. At 10:40, Sue Ellen Pruitt started watching the road from the porch, because Callie was never later than half past. By 11, Harold was driving Route 9 with his brights on, calling her name out the truck window into the dark. They found the pickup a little after midnight, pulled off on the shoulder near the old pecan grove, driver's door open. The dome light burned down to a dim orange, her purse still on the seat and her keys still in the ignition. What they found in the grove the next morning broke that family and that town, and out of respect for Callie, we will not linger over it, except to say that whoever had done this had done it up close, and that Callie Pruitt had not gone easily. In her last minutes, she had fought, and in fighting, she left something behind. Biological evidence that the county investigators, to their credit, collected and preserved that August morning. The trouble was the year. In 1991, Donna testing was in its infancy. The lab could tell you a great deal less than a lab can tell you today, and it could not, on its own, hand you a name. So the evidence went into an envelope, and the envelope went into storage, and a terrified town went looking for someone to blame before the sun had even dried the dew off the grass. They did not have to look far, because Ashford in 1991 already knew the shape of the answer it wanted. There was a young man named Elijah Barnes, Eli, everybody called him, 22 years old, who cut grass and did groundskeeping for half the businesses on Route 9, including the Dixie Cream, and who happened to be black in a small Georgia town that, in 1991, still ran on assumptions it did not say out loud. Eli had been seen walking home along Route 9 that night, because walking home along Route 9 was how Eli got home. Within 72 hours, he was the only suspect the sheriff's office would name. The case against him was thin as tissue, no physical evidence tied to him. A single eyewitness who'd glimpsed a figure in the dark and grew more certain the more she was questioned, and a great deal of what everyone simply assumed. There was pressure, too, of a kind that never makes it into a case file. Cali was beloved, the town was frightened, and powerful people wanted this closed fast and closed quiet. One young deputy named Roy Tanner thought the whole thing was moving too fast in the wrong direction, and he said so, and he was told to keep his doubts to himself. Eli Barnes went to trial in the spring of 1992 in front of an all-white jury, was convicted in a single afternoon, and was sentenced to life in prison. He stood up in that courtroom and said, quietly, that he did not do it, that God knew he did not do it. Nobody in a position to matter was listening. And so Ashford put its grief to bed, believing justice had been served, while the person who had actually walked into that pecan grove sat somewhere in that same county, watching another man take the fall, and said nothing at all. The two families lived the next 3 decades in 2 different kinds of grief. The Pruitts mourned their daughter and, for a long time, took what comfort they could in the belief that the man who took her was behind bars. Sue Ellen kept Callie's room the way it was. Harold could not lead that river hymn for the better part of 10 years, and across town, in a small house down a clay road, Corinne Barnes began the loneliest fight in the county. The fight to prove her son was innocent, when everyone who mattered had already decided he wasn't. She wrote letters. She spent money she did not have on lawyers who told her the appeals were exhausted. She drove 4 hours each way to visit Eli every single month for 33 years, and she never once let him believe she doubted him, because she never did. Eli grew from a young man into a middle-aged one inside those walls. His father died while he was in there. His own hair went gray. And the whole time, in a freezer in a state evidence facility, the envelope from that August morning waited, holding the one thing that could not be pressured, coached, or assumed into a lie. Deputy Roy Tanner made sheriff, then retired, and he never stopped feeling like an accomplice to something. And he kept his own private notebook of everything that had bothered him about the Barnes case, and he waited for a day he wasn't sure would ever come. Every case we bring you takes weeks of digging through court records, tracking down the people who were there, and putting real lives back together, so they're more than a headline. If stories like Callie's and Eli's matter to you, the ones where the truth had to wait decades to be heard, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from tonight. It's genuinely what keeps this channel going. Now, let's get back to Ashford, because in 2022, a letter Corinne Barnes wrote finally landed on the right desk. It reached a Georgia Innocence Organization and an attorney named Priya Anand, who read 30 years of a mother's letters and then did the one thing no one had done since 1992. She asked whether the biological evidence from that August morning still existed. It did. It had been preserved, frozen, untouched. for 3 decades. Anand petitioned to have it tested with modern DNA technology, and the state, with a GB cold case agent named Marcus Webb now assigned, agreed. The first result came back and it did only half the job. But it was the half that mattered most to a man in a cell. The DNA left behind by Callie Pruitt's killer did not belong to Elijah Barnes. It excluded him completely. After 33 years, the science said what Corinne Barnes had been saying since 1992, that they had the wrong man. But exclusion isn't a name, and Callie Pruitt's real killer was still out there. So, Agent Webb sent the profile on for forensic genetic genealogy, and here is how that works, in plain terms. Because it is the reason this case finally cracked all the way open. The lab took the killer's DNA and uploaded it into the same public ancestry databases that ordinary people use to trace their family trees. And although the killer himself had never spit into a tube, a distant cousin of his had, out of simple curiosity about where the family came from. A genealogist pulled on that thread for months, building the family tree branch by branch, until every line but one was ruled out. And the name that remained standing at the end of it stopped Marcus Webb cold. It was a name everybody in that part of Georgia knew. Robert Hollister III, Bo. They'd always called him. The son of one of the most powerful families in the county. The Hollisters, who had owned the peach-packing plant and half of Main Street for 3 generations. In 1991, Bo Hollister had been a charming, well-liked 20-year-old home from college for the summer. A regular at the Dixie Cream. A boy whose family name opened every door in Ashford. In the 33 years since, he had become exactly what that upbringing promised. A respected businessman, a deacon, a 2-term state representative with his photograph on the wall of the county courthouse, a husband and father of 3 whom half the district would have trusted with their lives. Agent Webb went back into the 1991 file with this new name in front of him, and there it was, sitting in plain sight the whole time. Bo Hollister had given a statement in August of 1991. He had been at the Dixie Cream that night. He had spoken to Callie, and he had been waved off almost before the interview began, never seriously considered. Because in Ashford in 1991, you did not look twice at a Hollister. Least of all when you already had a poor black groundskeeper walking home in the dark to hang it on. Webb collected a discarded coffee cup after a legislative committee meeting, sent it to the lab, and 2 weeks later the answer came back a full and unambiguous match to the evidence Callie Pruitt had left under her own fingernails 33 years before. And now the details that would shock the community began to fall into place, one heavier than the last. It was not only that the killer had been the town's golden boy, it was that the machinery which sent Eli Barnes to prison had run so smoothly precisely because of who Bo Hollister was. The pressure to close the case fast, the reluctance to look at certain people, the door that shut on Roy Tanner's doubts in 1992, none of it had been an accident. A powerful family had wanted a frightening summer put behind the town quickly and cleanly, and a convenient, powerless suspect had made that possible, and for 33 years everyone had been comfortable enough not to ask the next question. This is what people mean when they say the details shocked the community. Not just the horror of what Bo Hollister had done as a boy of 20. The horror of understanding that the whole town had helped him keep it hidden, had shaken his hand at church, voted him into office, trusted him with their children, while an innocent man grew old in a cell 4 hours away, and an innocent man's mother drove that road every month for 3 decades. The arrest came on an ordinary Thursday, and it came at the state capitol. Agent Webb and 2 GBI investigators walked into the marble hallway outside a committee room, and Representative Bo Hollister, gray-haired and well-tailored and 60 years into a charmed life, turned at the sound of his own name spoken in a way he had not heard it spoken since 1991. Witnesses said he did not seem surprised so much as tired, as though a thing he had carried a very long way had finally gotten too heavy to hold. In the interview room, faced with a full Dina match, he gave up the last of it in a single sentence that was chilling for how small it was. "I never thought," he said, "that a groundskeeper's Dina would ever come between me and mine." He was charged with murder, and on the same day, in a courtroom in the county he'd left 33 years earlier, a judge vacated the conviction of Elijah Barnes. The two communities inside that one small town learned the truth on the same afternoon. The town that had trusted a Hollister, and the town down the clay roads that had known all along it was wrong and had never been able to make anyone listen. Callie Pruitt was 19 years old. She sang an old river hymn in the last week of her life. She wore a thin gold cross she never took off, and she treated every tired soul who came through her line like they mattered, because to her they did. For 33 years, the man who took her walked free and respected, while the man who didn't sat behind bars. And it was Callie herself. A few cells she scraped from her killer in the dark, kept frozen through 3 decades of everyone getting it wrong, who finally set both records straight. On the morning Elijah Barnes walked out of prison a free and innocent man, 55 years old. His mother Corinne was waiting at the gate. She was 82 now, small and stooped, and she had made that 4-hour drive one final time. And when her son came through those doors into the daylight, she reached up and put her hands on his face the way she had when he was a boy, and neither one of them could say a word. Roy Tanner was there too, an old man now, standing back a little, and Eli crossed the lot and shook his hand, because Roy Tanner was the one person in a uniform who had ever tried. And out at the Ashford Cemetery, the Pruitt family stood at Callie's grave and grieved her all over again. Because a truth this long delayed does not only bring peace, it also tears the scar back open. But they grieved her, at last, with the whole truth finally told, and the right name finally spoken out loud. Which leaves the rest of us holding the questions this case will not let go of. How many innocent men are sitting in cells right now because a frightened town wanted a fast answer and reached for the easiest person to blame? And how many of the real killers are still out there, respectable and gray, waiting on a cousin's knot test to finally catch up with them? What does a community owe a man like Elijah Barnes, who lost 33 years to its assumptions? And is there any apology that could ever be large enough? And when you learn that the guilty man spent those same decades as a deacon and a lawmaker while everyone looked the other way, what does that tell you about who we choose to trust? And why? I would genuinely like to know where you land on all of it. So tell me in the comments below. Dina solved the murder of Callie Pruitt after 33 years, and in doing so it gave a girl her justice and gave an innocent man back what was left of his life. Stories like theirs are the reason this channel exists. Proof that the truth does not care how powerful you are or how long you've hidden, and that it will wait, frozen and patient, for the day science can finally read it. If you believe that too, subscribe so you don't miss the next case, and you'll find more solved cold cases waiting in the description below. Thank you, as always, for watching.